Hi there, my name is Stuart Tan. I've been a speaker for the last 29 years, having worked with well over 500,000 people across the globe. One of the reasons why I do this is because I find that it's a great joy to see people going through the training and to be able to end up being more enlightened than they were before. However, this has limits. I don't have the ability to reach as many people as I want to, and as a result, I've got to do something like this in order to elevate their thinking to a new level that transcends pain and suffering. Speaking of pain and suffering, this video is going to be based off a meta-analysis. In other words, I'm going to dive into scientific literature in order to benefit everybody, distilling it and making sure that you can get access and understand the literature so that you'll have protocols and ways to actually practically apply it. Now, this should be in the hands of everybody. The unfortunate thing is that very few people actually have the patience to read through these journals, so I'm going to go through them and help you out in whatever way I can. Now, my purpose is to elevate people to a level that transcends their pain and suffering, so the idea of diving into some of this research is going to potentially sound a little bit difficult to you, but trust me, it's going to be very worth it. I happened to come across this research paper by Stephen Crow, and this is a 2020 paper published in the Journal of Nursing Clinics of North America. Now, this is a very recent paper, and as a meta-analysis, it gives me some bedrock of findings to discuss and to share with you based on my lens as somebody who's been coaching, helping people with mental health and well-being. I was one of the vendors who catered to the Health Promotion Board's desire to want to reach out and help HR professionals and their teams to propagate the processes of understanding, identifying, and supporting mental well-being issues in their organizations. And this was a tender that enabled us to conduct well over 20 sessions across a year. What I found in this paper that was particularly interesting were a few things. So before I do that, let me dive into Crow's definition of guided imagery in the first place. So he breaks it down in this fashion, and I don't want to take him too far out of context, so I'll read a few things. Firstly, this paper suggests that guided imagery is a mind-body technique. In other words, it is not just something in your cognitions, it is something that affects your body. And there is a mechanism for this, as identified by many other psychologists all across the world. It's also a process of visualizing from direct imagery or from storytelling and metaphor use. So either of these methods seem to work pretty well. And interestingly enough, in neuro-linguistic programming, Dr. Milton Erickson was a storyteller who utilized hypnosis. And it sounds like this is the primary mechanism that neuro-linguistic programmers who are well-versed and effective in utilizing might be able to create the same kinds of benefits and outcomes as stated in this paper. Next, it is typically as a result of envisioning an event in a positive and affirmative manner before the experience of the actual event. In other words, you're literally doing mental rehearsal. If you wanted to feel calm in a certain situation, you're mentally rehearsing yourself being calm in that future situation before it actually happens. In other words, it suggests here that the individual is guided to develop an advantageous image mentally with a focus on the imagination to feel, see, hear, and smell the event as though it were real. In neuro-linguistic programming, we call this the as-if frame. You put yourself into that as-if frame and experience it and embody all of these experiences. The only thing that they've missed out is the sense of taste, because it's possible to taste certain things and also have a particular emotional effect. So why is this so critical? When we talk about the ability to utilize guided imagery, what's the big deal about guided imagery? Can't I just close my eyes and fantasize and suddenly something happens for me? Is that like the basis of manifestation? In reality, what guided imagery does is it is manifesting the future for us, but in a manner that's not so mystical. It's actually quite straightforward. Ultimately, it is a manner to harness physiological and psychological capabilities in order to produce the kinds of results that we want. And the clearer we are on these processes, the more likely guided imagery is going to support us in doing a variety of things. What are these things? Number one, the ability to manage pain and accelerate healing. Number two, the ability to manage anxiety and increase quality of sleep. Number three, the ability to reduce food cravings and even food consumption, which lead to positive health benefits. Number 4, utilizing guided imagery to manage the immune system, enhance immunity, and also to fend off diseases. So these are quite interesting areas of application insofar as the use of just something absolutely free and absolutely accessible to almost everyone. So the question is, why is it that such applications have not been made more broadly in the context of, global challenges? Like, why did we not utilize guided imagery as a process of enhancing immunity so that we wouldn't have to take, let's say, the COVID vaccine, for example? There are many questions surrounding it, but I think I found the answer. In the United States, for example, there is a focus on what they call complementary and integrative health techniques. Now, CIH is a big thing in the United States and it's starting to grow because it's non-invasive and it is quite free. Free from costs, of course, right? However, the problem with this is while it is flourishing in some areas, in places like Southeast Asia, you hardly hear of this. And it becomes a bit of a challenge when you say, oh, we're going to do X and Y, like hypnosis and guided visualization, and people start to think that there's something wrong with you because the paradigm of medicine is all about something that is a little bit more invasive, taking a pill, doing some surgery, and so on. So what we want to do is to understand this process. So let's dive into the first research that was done that talks about something known as gate control theory. Now, what exactly is gate control theory? In King's paper in 2010, whenever you use guided imagery, it's almost like closing off the dam on the pain and opening up a distracted path towards paying attention to something else so that your conscious awareness is focused on one area while the other side does not have such conscious awareness. And I believe to a certain extent that's true, but it's very hard to assess. In fact, I don't quite like the idea of gate control because that itself is a metaphor. I'd rather take a look at it from the actual neuroscience, which highlights that there's nerve growth factor in your neurons. When you have sufficient nerve growth factor in a habitual behavior, it tends to keep this the same. However, if you end up trying to build a new habit, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people find it difficult to build a new habit because they don't know that it is unnecessary to stop this old behavior, but rather to begin to emphasize and pay attention to the new behavior so that, according to Hebbian neuroscience, neurons that fire together will wire together. And in terms of differences within groups, the evidence does not remain strong and it's not absolute, not 100% certain, but to a certain extent, you could say that it could be recommended because it gives some measure of relief to some people. Even though there is no positive effect for everybody, there is no negative effect. And that's the key advantage for guided imagery as well. Another interesting paper that was highlighted is the study of DePaulis in 2019, with 104 randomized patients who had advanced cancer using progressive muscle relaxation, right? And some of them experience, they have terminal cancer. And one of the reasons why they did that was to apply progressive muscle relaxation in order to distract the patients from pain and the physical deterioration. And what happened was out of these 104, I dived into that paper and I found that out of the 104, 13 of them dropped out, leaving only 91, but that's still a relatively strong sample size. And what happened was that it supported strongly the efficacy of the combination of progressive muscle relaxation together with guided imagery to relieve those who are distressed from pain. So one would wonder why we don't do this even more, isn't it? And I find that perhaps the issue has got to do with the way by which it is brought across. I mean, I know for a fact that if you want to impact other people, you need to use some intervention method. And this is not just like putting up a flashcard, you've got to use language. And I'm going to come back to this topic on language in a short while. The next paper that talked a little bit about the impact on pain and quality of sleep is a randomized study with regard to groups that had fibromyalgia. So I just did a Google search and fibromyalgia, according to the NIH, is defined as a chronic, long-lasting disorder that causes pain and tenderness throughout the body, as well as fatigue and trouble sleeping. So with this challenge, they presented guided imagery as an intervention methodology, and they did it utilizing guided imagery CDs, which you listen to 4 to 5 times per week. Based on the study, they did a between time study where at the beginning of the study, there were no significant differences between the two groups with regard to trait states and sleep quality. However, at the end of the study, it highlighted that there was a significant difference in terms of pain tenderness, anxiety, sleep, quality of life, and even a sense of self-confidence or self-efficacy. Now that is a big thing. Imagine you could use the power of guided imagery to guide you through something that enables you to feel really confident about your ability to control life. We all know that the studies in self-efficacy theory by Professor Albert Bandura have shown that self-efficacy is a very powerful mover of motivations and volition. So if you've got a high level of self-efficacy, there's a high chance that you will believe that you can take charge of your life. This idea of a strong internal locus of control has been covered in one of my videos previously, and you can go ahead and watch that if you'd like. The next study is about something everybody's talking about, right? In Asia, we consume food, we love food, but unfortunately, our cravings for food are also just as intense. So in this study, what they did was to utilize something called cognitive diffusion and guided imagery in order to reduce food cravings. And they wanted to see whether the reduction of food cravings was going to help you to reduce your consumption as well. Now, why is this important? Number one, it shows that if you utilize guided imagery, it can actually influence your weight. So those people who have been applying intermittent fasting routines but feel extremely hungry could actually lean into GI in order to enhance the effects of their intermittent fasting protocols. Now, what's also interesting is that for this group, they utilize cognitive diffusion, which is a metacognitive strategy where you are, instead of experiencing hunger and cravings, you start to pay attention to the cravings itself and you think about the cravings. So we know that metacognition puts you into a different perceptual position that enables an individual to have lower emotional affect, but a higher objective observation. And this is probably one of the reasons why it indicated that the cognitive diffusion and guided imagery reduced the subject's craving intensity and frequency, but these interventions also subsequently reduced craving-related food consumption, which is very powerful. And what they found was that there was no significant difference between just guided imagery and cognitive diffusion as interventions. I'll talk a little bit more about that in my discussion and why this might be the case from neuro-linguistic programming in a short while. Finally, there was a very detailed paper written by Trachtenberg in 2008, and it was an extensive and critical review on the impact of guided imagery on the immune system. And it's really powerful, and it shows some of the research that increases white blood cell count. So here are a few interesting findings. Number one, that there is a relationship between guided imagery, stress and relaxation, and the immune function. In other words, when you reduce stress, immunity goes up. So what it does say here is that changes in immune system efficacy are correlated with either an increase or decrease in white blood cell count or with changes in neutrophil adherence. Now, basically, when the functionality of the neutrophil, which is a form of white blood cell, will adhere, right, to whatever it is that's causing a drop in immunity or an invasion of the immune system, and it'll basically take it out. So if you have adherence, it's supposed to be a good thing. So in this case, when you change your immune system efficacy, it's likely to increase your white blood cell count. It's factual. So we know this for a fact. However, when we introduce stress and relaxation, it can actually impact the immune system because of the change of the total number of white blood cells or the kind of adherence it takes, right, for your neutrophil. Relaxation also plays an interesting part because it increases neutrophil adherence, which by definition also increases your immunity. This is done in spite of the fact that you may relax without having guided imagery. The next piece, which is very significant, is that there are decreases in white blood cell count only in early stages of guided imagery and or relaxation interventions. And this, after 4 to 5 weeks of guided imagery and or relaxation, white blood cell counts increase. Fascinating. In other words, there's a dip initially, or potentially a dip initially, and then later on your white blood cell counts actually go up. What this means is that you need a protocol of approximately 4 to 5 weeks in order to have a longer term impact. What is interesting also is that depending on the type of person, those who already have a depressed level of white blood cell count versus those who have a normal level, those who have a decreased level tend to exhibit a higher gain earlier, whereas those who have normal white blood cell counts tend to have a higher gain later. So let's take a look at the Trachtenberg schematic in terms of the correlations. It's a very interesting framework because it talks about the elements of guided imagery leading to what they posit as the effect on the limbic system that causes relaxation. So this cause and effect diagram leads to a few things. Relaxation impacts whether or not you already have a sustained stress response. So by looking at this, you see that there is a negative effect on the sustained stress response. There is also a negative impact on the stress neuropeptides. What that means is that when you relax, if you have chronic stress, it's going to be released and relieved. If you had many neuropeptides for stress, that would also be reduced. Next, because of the impact of the reduction of stress, is going to also have a negative correlation to anxiety and toward pain. So pain goes down, anxiety goes down. When anxiety goes down, it allows for the activation of the peripheral nervous system. Interestingly enough, the use of the peripheral nervous system is exactly what we want whenever we're going into a mindful state of relaxation. When you close your eyes and you start breathing, you are not in a fight or flight mode. So likewise, when pain goes down, the amount of stress neuropeptides will obviously go down. You're not going to feel anxious anymore. You're going to feel a little bit more relaxed. So because of the activation of the PNS, it also impacts the number of stress neuropeptides that you have, and as a result, it becomes a very nice loop that goes on. You're feeling more relaxed, there's no need for those stress peptides to show up. As a result, the PNS activation leads to what Trachtenberg calls immunocompetence. Pretty cool term. And then it creates counter-inflammatory effects. In other words, inflammation is a sign that there's a lot of activity in your white blood cells. So when it reduces the inflammation, you could say that the white blood cells have done what it's supposed to do. Likewise, without stress hormones in your system, the cardiorespiratory and metabolic effects are such that your heart rate will go down, your oxygen delivery to your system will go up, and there's something called a drop of hypercatabolism. So what is hypercatabolism? It's basically the breakdown of complex substances inside of your body. So if you are under prolonged amounts of stress, it might actually break down your muscles, the protein inside of your body in order to attempt to generate more energy. So overall, once you have a higher level of anti-inflammation in your system, which by the way is created as a result of taking anti-inflammatory pills such as vitamin D, vitamin D3, taking your vitamin C's, all these are anti-inflammatory in nature. And also, when you have more oxygen delivery, your heart rate is down, you are in a more relaxed state. So you have a positive overall outcome as a result. So this entire framework is fascinating because it shows us what we can do. However, the protocol that they have highlighted is a 5-step process to guided visual imagery or guided imagery in general. So here are some of the, and this was adapted from the Integrative Pain Science Institute, and I would like to highlight a few differences compared with what I might do. So the 5 steps are, number 1, assess the problem, which is fair. You need to diagnose it before you can actually intervene, right? Number 2, assume a relaxed position. I mean, again, depending on the protocol that you use, using a relaxed position might actually support this. However, I've known some people, in spite of a not so relaxed position, like standing up, they can still go into guided imagery. Third, control breathing pattern, which I'd agree. I mean, the moment you start changing your breathing, you automatically shift your brainwave patterns. Like for example, if you're in a beta brainwave or higher beta brainwave pattern, like 38 Hertz, you'll probably find that it's easier for you to get stressed compared with dropping that down to a lower alpha pattern like 8 hertz, for example. And this is very likely to influence your physiological outcomes as well. So changing the breathing is probably necessary, although it may not be the thing that you directly control. I'll come back to that in a while. Then number 4, create an imagery environment. And then number 5, begin on the journey. So you're kind of like painting a picture in people's minds. I'm just wondering where step 6 is, which is stop the journey and come back out, right? Because I believe that's something that I always have to do whenever I'm teaching people about guided visual imagery. So let's come back to this thing about breathing. How do I affect a person's breathing? Well, I guide them, right? I say breathe in, breathe out. However, it's not just the words, it's the manner by which I'm using the words. If I said breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, there's a certain tonality associated with that, isn't it? And I'm just wondering whether this tonality is going to help or to hinder. So for example, if I put you into a state which is breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, compared with breathe in, breathe out, don't you think the cadence of that tone is going to matter? I believe so. So if I wanted to put you into a relaxed mode and control your breathing, the language and the manner of the language, the paralinguistic elements are going to be crucial, isn't it? So if I said, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, that manner of speaking might actually engender a higher rate of relaxation compared with other forms, such as breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Why? Because according to the research, a longer breath out seems to put the entire body into a more relaxed mode. It's almost as if you're sighing, like somehow it puts your entire body into a more relaxed mode. By the way, shout out to Andrew Huberman for actually bringing that up. And the research there is actually quite interesting. Imagine the person who's guiding you is not able to do that. Tonal differences, paralinguistic differences. And heaven forbid, you're sitting face to face with the other person and you've got bad breath or whatever. You've got to control for many of these factors, right? So the only way to control this is to ensure that you've got proper and detailed training in hypnotic language patterns. So if I said something like, close your eyes and go into a deep state of trance and relaxation. Now, is that going to help you to get into a state of relaxation, or is that too distracting? In my opinion, too distracting. If I said, close your eyes and allow yourself to feel the sensation of your skin on your clothes and notice how comfortable you are. Now that statement, the way it is said, the rising and falling, almost like a gentle wave, might seem to mimic even the alpha brainwave pattern, right? Of course, I've got no basis for this. I'm just highlighting some theories. Basically, after putting a huge number of people into trance, this is a very interesting way of utilizing language, isn't it? So another interesting thing is Stephen Crow, who's the author of this meta-analysis, also stated that it's about these senses: feeling, seeing, hearing, and smelling. But I'm not sure why he left out the olfactory. So what it means is that we might need to utilize certain representational systems, and this is a NLP concept, in order to bring forth this image. But most people would not know how to do this. If I said, I'd like you to picture an apple pie right in front of you, take a deep breath in and smell what it's like for freshly baked apple pie. Isn't it something that will enhance the visual and the olfactory representations of what's going on inside? Doesn't that make you feel hungry? So I'm just wondering whether they actually had competent people and why these variabilities across all these research papers might be because the way by which they're utilizing linguistic, tonal, paralinguistic features is missing. And heaven forbid that they have somebody who's really boring in their hypnotic inductions or their guided visualization. So one of the keys, therefore, is to ensure that we utilize all of the things at our disposal, in my opinion. So while on a broad scale basis, controlling your breathing is one thing, if I get you to count utilizing a certain tempo, I can put the control in your hands. If you're just guiding yourself into that imagery, that will be quite helpful. However, if you are doing it as a facilitator of the guided imagery, surely you need to change the rate and pace of your induction. So if you said something like, okay, I'd like you to close your eyes, and as you close your eyes, feel relaxed. Now, relax, relax, relax. That kind of pace and tempo, is that appropriate for relaxation? In other words, there's a mode of congruence versus incongruence that matters in the guided imagery. If I said something like, close your eyes and allow yourself a moment to completely and fully relax now. This approach might change everything, isn't it? So the tonality probably will matter. So some of these elements that are inside the guided imagery could actually impact the ability for the facilitator to create an even more powerful relaxation process that ultimately reduces pain and anxiety. Why? Because the facilitator himself is already in a state of relaxation. And for all intents and purposes, the idea of psychological contagion, the social contagion that takes place, might actually impact the other person because of their mirror neurons and their interpretation of what my voice means to them. So this is a very powerful approach. If we were to use this on a regular basis, I can only imagine how we would speak to other people in order to change their states in a valuable way, of course, so that they'll be able to perceive less pain and to be able to feel freer. I can also imagine what it will be like to reduce aggression, not just pain. Imagine that you could use this to talk down people whenever you're in a negotiation setting. Imagine that you could do this in order to establish a stronger rapport, build a greater sense of bonding and connection with other people because they automatically feel relaxed around you. Especially, think about this, family environments where there's a lot of tension and conflict, working environments where leaders and team members may not get along very well. If you equip the leader with the capacity to speak in this language, imagine how it will be like whenever tensions begin to flare up and you just shift your tonality, you shift the way by which you're carrying representational systems so that you can bring everybody down to a state of relaxation. Or even better, if you are being told, hey, boss, your tonality is really, really boring, then you can shift that tonality to become more sprightly and more energized with a little bit more cadence inside of your tonality. Now, all of a sudden, does this sound like public speaking training? I think it does, doesn't it? And I think they are intertwined. Remember that one of the things that cropped up was the ability to tell stories, right? Metaphor and storytelling seem to be part of the journey of utilizing guided imagery. So is it not by any coincidence that Milton Erickson was a great storyteller? Milton Erickson, in case you guys don't know, was the role model behind neuro-linguistic programming. He was one of the keys to helping us to identify that there is a linguistic structure behind hypnosis. And that's one of the reasons why Ericksonian hypnotists now know that there is a structure to learn as a result of this pattern of behavior, so that it wouldn't take hundreds of hours, it would just take dozens of hours in order to master the language patterns of Milton Erickson. So what I find at the end of this is that the protocol should be quite straightforward, and I'm going to invite you to join me in this process so that you can begin to experience it, not just for us to talk about it without any experience. So right now, can I invite you to just join me? If you would, just pause whatever else it is that you're doing. Some of you might be multitasking, so just stop whatever it is that you're doing and do pause this video if you happen to be operating heavy machinery or if you're driving or doing something that requires your attention, okay? So, are you ready? I'd like you to close your eyes, please. Thank you. And as you close your eyes, I'd like you to take an opportunity to notice your breathing in and out and begin to regulate it. as that happens, breathing in ever so deeply and breathing out ever so gently, enabling you to control the tempo of your breathing. And as you experience this, I wonder whether you might notice something different about yourself. Starting from the top of your head, allowing yourself to take a journey as if the sunlight is melting like liquid from the top of your head all the way down your face, the back of your head, relaxing with this warm, overflowing sensation of absolute calm, peace, and relaxation. As you notice that, let this liquid sunlight travel all the way down your throat, down your shoulders, and relaxing any tensions that might be there. Let this flow through your veins into your arms and your fingers. And if there's any tension, negativity, or doubt, liberate it from your body as you continue to breathe in a cyclical and slow fashion. Bring to mind that this sensation is going down your chest and spreading through every part of your upper torso, making you feel ever so comfortable, ever so relaxed now. And as you continue to take this sensation downwards into your solar plexus, your lower torso begins to feel so relaxed that you might just edge towards the feeling of drifting off to sleep. And it's okay. Allow your body to rest peacefully and comfortably. Take a moment to bring this liquid sunlight traveling all the way down through your hips, the area around your thighs, all the way down to your very feet. And I wonder whether you feel warmer or cooler as a result, whether you're feeling lighter or heavier as a result. No matter the case, I'd like to thank you for joining me on this short journey. Take a moment now to pay very close attention once again to your breathing. As you take one deep breath in, notice how wonderful this sense of relaxation actually is. 2, as you take in another deep breath in, notice the sound of my voice. And as you begin to stir towards consciousness, allow your eyes to gently flutter wide open, coming back into this room, noticing what you see, hear, and feel, orienting yourself comfortably, and feeling absolutely relaxed, ready to take on the future. Now, as you went through that experience, how was it? I'd like to find out. Please type into comments down below, and let's see whether it's possible for us to tap into some of these amazing capabilities by utilizing guided imagery. Whether or not we have to enhance our competencies in building the representations inside our mind, whether we can utilize the right tonality and all that, in order for us to level the playing field and enable this capability to reach millions of people who are already out there. Let's not forget the fact that we haven't added music in the background, we haven't added additional harmonics in order to amplify the effect. How about the use of different kinds of instruments? Will drumming help, as it helps in some shamanic experiences? How about other kinds of musical instruments? Would string instruments be better than wind instruments? What kind of rhythms would there be? What kind of tempo would that be in order for it to be relaxed? Many of these questions will begin to sprout up as we continue to explore this journey on how to exploit the power of our mind to create a world that transcends pain and suffering. For now, if you found that this was helpful, please share this with people around you. Click on the like and subscribe so that we can reach more people who are actually facing pain from whatever circumstances, and perhaps they could utilize this to their benefit. I'll see you in the next video.